Hi, everyone, and welcome to the BookTrib live chat with New York Times bestselling author Andrew Gross. We are so excited to have him here tonight. He will be joining us in just a few moments. I will be your host and moderator for this evening, so please start submitting your comments and questions into the queue, and I will feed them to Andrew at a steady pace as soon as he arrives. Most of you know me as BookTrib Babe on Twitter. Go follow me there for news and updates. Better yet, follow BookTrib and sign up for BookTrib. You will get news, updates on our live chats, our giveaways, our blog tours, and so much more. And very exciting tonight, we are giving away a brand new Kindle Fire loaded with a selection of Andrew's books. But you must be a member of BookTrib to win the Kindle Fire, so please go sign up if you're not signed up already. And wait till the very end. Andrew will be announcing the winner of that Kindle Fire. Speaking of Andrew's books, Andrew's latest book, No Way Back. It is about the happy suburban mother, Wendy Gould. She meets a man in a hotel room. Seems ordinary, but then this man ends up mysteriously dead, leaving her as the only witness to the murder, and she must run from federal agents. And you thought you had bad dates. Imagine being in her shoes. So go pick up a copy of that book to find out how the story unfolds. And without any further ado, I will invite our guest this evening, Andrew, on camera and start the questions. Let me make sure he's there waiting in the wings. All right. Hi, Andrew. How are you? We're so happy to have you. Good. We are so happy to have you here tonight. Oh, puppy. We love pets. We're so happy to have you. So we'll start with the first question. It is by Melly. She asks, what inspired you to write this book? Was there anything that ever happened in your personal life that led you to write it?
You mean like being caught in a hotel room with another woman? I won't tell you. I've actually had a few books that have resulted from things that have happened to me personally, but this one not necessarily. I guess basically, to me, any of the books I do, I kind of triangulate a storyline, and the first storyline that hit me in this was something that just occurred to me a couple of years, 2 or 3 years back, about what would happen, just loosely said, if a gal hooked up with a guy and spends the night, doesn't know who he is, she's in the shower the next morning ready to leave, and all of a sudden police break down the door, and let's say he's a terrorist or some bad guy, and she somehow is forced to sort of shoot it out and be on the run, and all of a sudden people think she's a terrorist. And I sort of liked the setup of that, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I parked it in my head for a couple of years. And then, this story kind of evolved, and I found another way to really approach it by, in terms of how this thing gets going. But like I said, every story is really 2 or 3 stories together. So the second storyline in this was an article I read in the New York Times, which was very, very compelling to me, about someone who had turned state's evidence for the feds and against an Albanian criminal, and then at some point they no longer needed his testimony. They dropped the charges, and after the Albanian guy literally murdered this witness's entire family in retaliation. One, they wouldn't grant him asylum, and two, they just basically threw him out on his own. And, it was just a very compelling thing. Eventually, it went to the Supreme Court, and he was granted asylum during the writing of the book. So I sort of link those storylines together, except in this case, I made that person a nanny who was carrying the burden of this past from Mexico, that her family had been killed by a drug lord, that her father was the one who had turned state's evidence, and she was the one surviving person. So I had these sort of coalescing storylines. One of them became the character Wendy Gould. The other one became a character Lauritzia. And basically, this story leads into kind of I like conspiracies. Conspiracies are fun to play with because things in my books always start out local and benign, and then you begin to peel away the onion, and what's left is a lot more at stake with much higher consequences. So in this case, the conspiracy involves, although I shouldn't say it, I guess, the possible sale of guns to Mexican drug cartels. So there you have that. Now, I guess if I know the routine, it's up to me to figure out what to talk about next. So what does this say? You seem to be inside the heads. I'm not sure if you guys can even read this other than me, but you seem to be inside the heads of people and write psychological type thrillers. Yeah, psychological type thrillers. Have you ever considered writing a TV series? Well, I don't really work, even though I started out with Jim Patterson for 6 books, I don't really work collaboratively so well. So I'm not sure TV would be the medium. But as it happened, this last book, No Way Back, was just bought by Ron Howard's production company, Imagine, for television. So that's fun. And I don't know if they'll want me in to write. They'll probably want me in to tear my hair out when they make so many changes to it that I can't believe that it even resembles the book, probably only the title. But in any case, they seem to love it. They've already gotten underway on it. So, I may not be writing for them, but we'll see what happens. And here is one from Amina. I found it interesting that you've chose 2 women as lead characters. As a male writer, is it more challenging to draw on female characters and delve into the psychology versus a male character? I'll tell you that in a moment when I take this female character, sorry Lily, out from behind me, who's making it very difficult for me to sit up. I've since my first book, The Blue Zone, was written from the persona of a female character, of a young gal. I'm not sure what it is, but I've always sort of enjoyed writing that way, and I've been told on a number of levels that I do it pretty good. So my publishers push for it. Ultimately, more readers are female than male, but I like writing in a women's voice because I like putting sort of innocent, regular people in peril in my books. And I also strive for, sorry, dog left, strive for an emotional resonance at the end of the book. All of my books involve family and families that are torn apart and families that are put in jeopardy. And I'm also sort of caught up in the idea of an everyday hero, just someone like you or me, someone you see every day, a yoga mom, or a guy who runs up the sidelines cheering on his kid at school, who is then forced to really stand up against characters that are much more powerful than they are, and do they have the courage to do it, and the sort of moxie, the canniness to do it. So I like that. In terms of women, maybe it comes from spending 15 years in the women's clothing business before I started writing, but I seem to be able to do it. I've always been around strong-willed women. I got a couple in the other room here. Even my dogs are strong-willed women. So I guess for whatever reason, I found it natural. And because of the emotional aspects of my books, sometimes it's easier to do that through a woman's perspective than through a guy's. So you outline your stories, and you know how they will end before you start writing. Pardon me. It's not water, it's vodka. The answer to that is yes, I do outline. I'm actually a fairly strong proponent of that, especially for people who are starting out writing their first or second novels, and if they're these plot-intensive books like thrillers generally are, I think it really helps to get to grasp and get your arms around the story even before you set out. I do it for a number of reasons. One, I want my publisher as a partner in my books, and I want them vetting my storylines before I even begin. And so I do outline, but I've sort of begun instead of, and let me backtrack. The first book I ever sold, The Blue Zone, after I worked with Patterson, I wrote out a 80-page outline. It was about 60, 70 chapters, and I ended up getting a 3-book contract with HarperCollins off of an outline, which anyone in the industry will tell you in fiction never, 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 never happens. And most people said it was the most compelling treatment of a book they'd ever read, which is something I really learned from Patterson. Um, but I've sort of lately begun to take shortcuts, and some of it is now I've written 14, 15 of these between my work with Jim and my own. I know I can do it. I know I can bring them to the finish. And I've sort of begun to outline the first 10, 20 chapters and let that be my guide. And then, once I get into the book, I let it take me where it's going to take me. I actually heard Khalid Hosseini, I think that's how it's pronounced, on Morning Joe this morning. He's the author of The Kite Runner and the new book, And the Mountains Echoed. And he said that he doesn't outline anything, that he just literally arrives at the book every day, not exactly knowing where he's going to end up that day, which I really think is quite amazing. But I guess it takes all types to do that. I am struggling a little bit with an ending now for the book I'm finishing. I'm about 20 pages from the end, and even today I just sort of had a way that I wanted to take it and diverge in a different way than I thought I would. So you have to allow for the magic of writing to take you, and not just what you put on paper, obviously, but it helps to know where the hell you're going in these things. John B. is asking, do you need to do much research on No Way Back? Um, I always answer this question wrong because I know what people really want to hear is I researched the book for 2 years before I wrote it. I spent hours in archives and libraries and, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, I sort of told you how the book began. The court case that involved this other character, Lauritzia, I got basically online. I do site research. I mean, the book, I hate to give away a book, you guys probably haven't read it, but it ends in sort of a really interesting environment somewhere in Colorado. Actually, the largest sand dunes in America are nestled under 14,000-foot peaks in southern Colorado. So I certainly went out there because I had a fascination with that and thought it would be a fantastic place to sort of commit a murder that um, bodies would never be found. Um, and I do my share of research, but I think I do about 90% of it from the seat of in my office. I'm not in my office now. I'm in my wife's office because her computer has a camera. I don't have this nice art in my office, but what I do has bought this nice art. I do my share. I mean, I'm now writing a book currently that I think is going to be called Everything to Lose, and I'm finishing it up, as I say, and it's a story that combines a similar story set up maybe to No Way Back, but I've sort of melded it into one, the psychological type of what they call CU children who are callous and unemotional, which they think is sort of the building block of psychopaths as grown-ups. And I've also woven in a lot of Hurricane Sandy, which is something that hit us solidly here in this house. So I sort of have done a lot of research, both in terms of those and site locations, because a lot of it takes place in Staten Island and places where neighborhoods were flooded and people were killed. So I do my share, but the truth is I like to move pages. And ultimately, if you're coming to me just to sort of get the smell of the locker room and the police station, there are probably writers who do that better than me, or more intentionally than me. I'm really into grabbing people in my stories and turning pages. Sharon Chance, um, do you find that you have more women fans or men fans of your writing? Uh, how broadly are you speaking there, Sharon? I guess more women. I think it's something I've inherited from Jim. I know more women. And I don't think it relates to who I choose to use as a main character. I think it's something that I've sort of carried forward from Jim Patterson. I think it's the kind of books I like to write, which fast-paced, sort of emotionally grabbing. I don't write about spies and I don't write about professionals, meaning, crime solvers. And I'm not a 1 and 1 equals 2 guy in terms of, building the evidence and all. So I think more women than men. Certainly if Facebook is any gauge. It appears to be, but you know, Joe Myers is a really good thriller critic. He's actually based in Connecticut, and I know the BookTrib people know him well, but coincidentally, I was interviewed by him last week, and we talked about this. And you know, my books are anything but soft, but for whatever reason, they do sort of have an appeal to women. So anyway, once again, maybe it's all those years in the clothing business. Um, and Sharon says there's nothing wrong with having a bunch of adoring women fans. Let me take a look at you, Sharon. Let me get closer. You're a cute guy, so own it. Apologies to your wife. No, you don't have to apologize. She's cute too, actually. Thank you. Who's up next? Prairie Dawn. Will we ever hear from Ty Hauk again? Good question. This is how what happens when you sort of get a lot of cooks in the publishing kitchen. I've wanted to bring Ty back. I'm obviously fond of Ty as a character, and I sort of made a zigzag away from him, really because my publisher and my agent felt that I do these standalones really well. And so they sort of pushed me into a couple of them. I don't know if it was the right decision. It may have been made for the right reasons, but I don't know if it's the right result. Sorry. Um, And my goal is that the next book, which is not this next book, which I'm finishing, but the book that would be for 2015, it's a long way out for you, but it's going to be just starting for me, is going to be a tie book. It'll be the last book of my very long contract with HarperCollins. And I think the best thing I could do would be to close it on a tie, a tie book. So basically, he's been hanging out on the beach with this foxy little Naomi, who I think he ended up with at the end of the last book. And I have a storyline, so hopefully we can bring him back. I'd love to. One way or another, he'll be back soon, even if it's with another publisher. Charlotte, was it hard to come up with a title? Titles are, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if you ask an author, well, how do you title a book? My gut feeling is 99% of them are going to say, well, you know, I'm looking for something cool and thriller-like, and I try to pick out some piece related to the book, a phrase or something, and work on that. Um, I have had a lot of difficulty titling my books. Not so much that I think I don't come up with good titles, because the majority of my titles ended up being from me, but they don't come necessarily quickly. And I have been through a lot of wars with my publishers, trying to come up with a title. And they start out being really collegial and friendly and constructive. And then when a month or two goes by and I don't like what they're proposing and they don't like what I'm proposing, and every title I come up with, which by the way has to work in England because I'm co-published in England and Australia, it's not a foreign country in my contract. It's like a 51st state, so they have ownership of me. And once I came up with what I thought was a great title for a book called Blind Curve, everyone signed off on it in the state. And then in England, they say no one here would know what a blind curve was. So back to the drawing board. So this title went out for about a month. And sometimes it gets hostile because it's holding me up in my mental time for moving on to a new book. I think everything's put to bed, can't come up with a title. People are proposing titles that are foreign to me, that they're sort of alien to my own feelings in the book. And a lot of times it would make for very interesting TV to hear some of the back and forth. That said, I think at some point I had proposed No Way Back, and we went around 6 different times, and eventually, I wish I could remember now some of the proposed titles that we had come up with here. But they want really thrillery titles. I mean, Speeding Bullet, or I don't like to do that crap actually, but they really want thriller-centric titles. So everyone loved 15 Seconds that I came up with on the book before, but I've had a few. Eyes Wide Open and Reckless were very, very traumatizing processes to go through. And I'd say it took 2 months to come up with an agreeable title, and probably a lot of frayed nerves and a lot of relationship with publishers strained. Mina, you have co-authored 6 books with Patterson. Actually, 5 or 6. Do you think you will repeat the experience in the future, and do you prefer to be the only, or do you prefer to be the only Deus ex machina? I prefer to be the only Deus ex machina. No more said. I actually enjoyed the experience with Jim. I won't go into it in depth, but to me, he's brilliant. Maybe not as a stylist, but certainly as a creator of ideas and to someone to have in partnership with and to have as an editor on a book and to be sharing his instincts and he taught me an awful lot. But I was ready to go on my own. And a lot of people say, would you ever go back and do one with him? And the answer is yes, actually, I would like to do that. I don't know that one he would want to. I don't know that it would work out financially. I don't know that, it's ever going to happen. But I think sort of if the Eagles could get back together, I could get back together. And I think it would be really fun to do one more, but don't sit up waiting for that. Ah, here's someone from someone I had invited to New York. Hey, Andy, how are you doing? I'm doing good, Tammy. How are you? How did I answer that one? Tough question, Tammy. Charlotte, how many hours do you spend each day writing? Uh, let's see, another thing that this Khalid Houssani said today, I loved it on Morning Joe. I'm plugging his books more than mine, is that the internet has become the whiskey, is today's whiskey for writers. In other words, it's our diversion. We bury ourselves in the internet as much as we do, as people used to do in whiskey to escape the travails of writing. Um, I write in the mornings. I really get up to my office about 8 o'clock. I do futz around a little bit, and you can catch me on Facebook or I'm on my mailing list, website. Might play a little solitaire or even a game of hearts just to sort of get into the spirit of it. I always loop backwards first and look at what I wrote yesterday that I thought was so good that reads like a piece of shit today. I can say that, right? And then I try to write a chapter a day. As I said, I generally outline in my chapters of those who've read me are 3 to 5 or 6 pages. So I do try to get one chapter done a day, and really no more. I generally try to make a marathon out of it as opposed to a sprint. Usually takes me about 6 months, 7 months to get a first draft done, then a couple of months revising, second and third drafts, and as it goes through the process. So I work for 5 or 6 hours every day. I generally do the cooking in the house, as I did tonight, and waiting afterwards. We'll catch a bite here. And so my afternoons, a little of it is spent staring up at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I'm going to be writing tomorrow, and two, doing some marketing gets me out of the house and maybe cooking a dinner. But I do my work in the morning. So John B, thank you for answering my question. Invoice to come. Um, do you take a break after finishing a book? Yes, I take about a month, sometimes two but in that time I'm trying to set up the next book. Now, what we've generally done is turn the book over, and literally, if that's on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, we're out to the Napa Valley, where I've always spent a month the last 5 or 6 years. We rent a house, we rent the same house, we have good friends out there, got into the wine trade a little bit, really enjoy, I've become a Pinot fanatic, so I love wines and love sort of exploring and figuring out, finding new ones. And so we would be out there for a month. This year we're not doing it. We are going to Paris, but for a week. But everyone has to recharge. Not everyone. I guess some people just start the next day. There are a lot of people who work on coincident multiple projects and they're finishing one, but they're still involved in another. But I like that. You know what? The best thing about writing to me is the lifestyle that comes with it. I mean, I love my books and I love the reactions that it gets in people, and I love letters that I get and emails that I get, and I love being involved in my characters. But I love my life, the life that comes from it. And I was sort of a person for years who was a prisoner of their work, managing large companies at an early age. I just sort of, from the time I was in my mid-20s, was traveling 200 days a year, and was the kind of person that got into the office at 8 and didn't get home until 9. I love the life that I have now, and I love when I used to be able to be here with my kids, and I love even being able to drive to the airport to pick up my daughter who came in from Italy yesterday, and I love, you know, putzing around in the house or hanging out with the dogs or taking the dogs for a walk in the middle of the day or going to the market and figuring out what we're going to cook or going, we have a place in Florida, going down there for 4 or 5 days and not having to report to the office. So, I like that time as much as I like my writing time. So, it's what it gives me. And it really is about life more than it's even about books. And, writing is an extension of your life, and the ultimate goal is to be happy. And the one thing, I can't say that writing makes me ecstatic. My wife would probably tell me I'm a complete liar because I spend a lot of my days sulking and complaining and going on about the industry. But ultimately, it's a pretty happy, fulfilling life. Tammy again, how is No Way Back California project coming along? I think she was with me in New York when I mentioned that it was sold. And I haven't heard back one bit from them. I just know it's in work. It's a long-term project. It's hopefully going to be a TV series. I don't even see it as a TV series. It's mysterious to me. I certainly saw it as a movie, but creative artists it ended up in the television department there, and it got sold. So I'm delighted because even though I write sort of in terms of entertainment, in terms of film, I think very film-centric books. I've never had as much as a cup of coffee after I left Patterson out in Hollywood, so I'm very excited about it, but I'm really not thinking about it, and it's going to be a while before anything concrete happens. Someone has to work on a script, so, you'll be the first to know. Sharon again, do you find the promotional part of being an author challenging, doing book signings, working with interviewers? As a reviewer, I appreciate you taking the time to do this chat. I worked in the ski and tennis business and clothing. I was a president of Head and Le Coq Sportif, two very upscale brands. I like being in public. I like speaking to crowds. I like sharing of myself. So in general, I enjoy that. Now, I'm on Facebook every day, but I hate it. When I say I hate it, I just really don't. I just think that 98% of what goes on there is just silly chatter, and we're all a product of it because we all buy in. So I'm also a creator of silly chatter, and it just sort of bothers me that this has to be part of my routine. And in terms of book signings, I like them when there's 100 people in the room, and I hate them when there's 5 people in the room, and we all get both. So it's hard. But I enjoy being out there. When I was working with Jim, I didn't get out there, and I feel that I have something to say for myself and some part to give to my fans. So yeah, I generally like it. Probably more than most, I think. Let's see. Catherine, hello, Catherine. Is there anything you find particularly challenging in my writing? I'm not sure I understand that question. You want to shoot me a follow-up to it? In my writing, about writing? Um, I'm not sure. Let's see. There's a lot of things that are challenging about the writing business today. I'm not sure if this is the time to go into it, but certainly it's very, the whole movement towards digital away from print has been both an opportunity and an albatross around people's necks. It's certainly changed the whole way business is conducted and done. It does put a lot more effort on people's promotional time. The handful of authors who sort of have iconic brand names, the internet or the digitally, it's been a multiplying effect for them. They've never sold as much, but the rest, I think, and I'm sort of either on the lowest level of the top rung or the top level of the second rung. The rest are sort of fed to promote for yourself, and the fact that your presence in books is a lot less than it's been is challenging. The fact that and I'll probably be dealing with this in a book or two, in a year or two. Um, um, you know, challenging about writing is, for me, is coming up with an idea for every book. I can execute the books, and I'm comfortable creating characters, creating likable characters, creating diverse characters, meaning diverse from the books before. I don't have a stand, if you're doing a continuing character, it's a lot easier to keep coming up with these books on a yearly basis because you've already gotten your hero. You've already sort of put him in a venue, and you've gotten his friends. And so basically, you got to come up with a plot or with a crime or something new. I usually start over every book. So that is a challenge for me. A guy like Patterson could come up with, 10, 20 ideas a year. I try to come up with one good one. And so that to me is much more so than the actual act of writing. Does your background in the fashion business, asked Laura, help you with marketing yourself? Um, yeah, I mean, I always sort of make a joke that, you know, when, publishing has its own sort of people in it, and they're usually far more collegial and a lot less confrontational than I'm used to. And I'm probably a product of my folks were in that business. I was in that business. Um, I intend to write about that business because it's a book that's left inside me that I would like to write a multi-generational story about the fashion business. And I always sort of joke that, a lot of the guys I meet in this business couldn't spend one day in the fashion business or in the garment business. They'd either be booted out the door and say sayonara, or they'd be happy to be out that door. And I think it's toughened me. I think it's made me very goal centric. I think it's made me um, learn how to stand up, and when you say market yourself, I've done my share of selling in the clothing business. If you can do that, you can sell a book too. So who is next? Richard Bard, I know you. We were on a panel together in Thriller Fest. Hey, Andy, you mentioned that you're leaving HarperCollins soon. Well, in a couple of years. I don't know that I'm leaving. Um, I'm just finishing a contract. I have no idea what will happen after that contract, or where I want to go, or where they want me to go. I tend to think that, you know, contracts are great when you're there a long time, and we'll see. But that's private stuff. What's whether it's indie publishing, I don't know. I think the math of publishing today sometimes takes people in that direction. When 70% of your books can be digital, in mine have become about 65%. Sometimes when 70 or 80% are digital, it makes more sense, I think, to um, sort of be more in control of how you create that digitally, and whether the publisher really is responsible for as much of those digital sales. But I don't know what's going to hold the store for me. I wouldn't be surprised, wherever I ended up the next thing. But who knows? There's a part of me that wants to write historical novels, so I'm not sure, who would want me to do that, or would want to pay me to do that. So we shall see. Let's see. Um, we have 30 minutes left, says BookTrib. Get your questions in. I guess that's not to me. I think we've run out of questions. Nancy Gardner asks, how do you keep motivated to stay on task with your writing? I guess I'm not disciplined enough. Um, I don't find it that difficult. I wouldn't know where to go if it wasn't to my desk and write. I'm not a happy guy if I'm not writing in some way, whether I'm going back in a book or forward. I need to get that out of me on a daily basis, and So to me, it doesn't involve discipline. It's sort of my chemistry at this point. Like I said, I wouldn't know where to go. Um, that said, by nature, I think I'm a disciplined person. I'm a task-oriented person. I have an MBA from Columbia. I mean, I ran some decent-sized companies, and so, I think I bring that to the table. But I mean, writers have to get books done. So if a writer feels challenged about the discipline of doing it, um, you're not going to get the work done. So to me, it's a job, and I have to get it done the same way I'm sure many of you go to the office. Now, does your mind meander a little bit during the day? Of course it does. I mean, if you watched me, it's sort of like watching a football game. I mean, I heard of the 60 minutes, only 13 minutes of it is actual playing time. The rest of it is the huddle and, you know, getting up to the line of scrimmage or commercials or, um, you know, so I think if you watch me, I don't know how much of the 5 or 6 hours I spend at my desk is actual writing time, but it's all contributive to the process and gets it done. Hi, Mike. If when you get writer's block, what gets you past it? I am quoting this guy Husseini a lot on this, and he said something else that was really good today that I wanted to put on Facebook for prospective writers. And here's a guy that, I don't have writer's block that much because I usually come with an outline knowing what chapter I'm writing. Now, I might not know sometimes how I want to get into that chapter. I might not know whose point of view sometimes would be right for that chapter. But I always have a sense of what the next thing in front of me is. Um, but he said that he stares at a lot of empty pages because he doesn't outline. So when he gets writer's block, if that's what you want to call it, and I don't think he would even call it that, but when he doesn't know what the next thing to write is, he says it's usually indicative that there's a problem in his story. And what he tries to do is take himself out of the box and see, is there something wrong with the story? Am I going down? Am I in a wrong place? And I thought that was spot on. Because what you what you you know what that usually is indicative of isn't that you can't write a scene or you don't know what the next scene is, but that there's something sort of nagging you. And I get that a lot. I can't go forward because there's just something bugging me about what I've done, and I have to find the source of that. And whether it's a character or whether it's scenes leading up to where I am, once I solve those problems, I can usually then free my mind to go forward. Like anything, your mind can hold you captive, and usually I find when it is holding me captive creatively, it's because I haven't done something right. And some of that can be that you just haven't learned to love your main character. A friend, MJ Rose, if some of you know her, once said to me, and I was talking about the same thing, that I'm just not in love with this book. And a lot of times I'm not in love with my book, but at some point, maybe sometimes literally 3/4 of the way through, something happens in it, some kind of magic that all of a sudden just makes me so attached to it, attached to a character, and then like through that character, attached to how they all behave. So sometimes it's just not being in love with your main character. And if you're not in love with your character, the reader can see it, and you can't really hide it in your prose. So once again, it's not really a matter of writer's block. It's really a matter of solving the problems that are blocking you to see your own work and go forward. Hula monkey. I think I think that's an in-house question. Have you ever toyed with the idea of writing something besides a thriller? Absolutely. I haven't toyed with it. I think about it a lot. I may do it at some point. Um, I may write historical thrillers if anybody wants them from me. I'm very pigeonholed. I mean, even sometimes, this book that I'm writing now, I actually outlined with a male hero, a young guy who had come out of drug rehab, who was looking to regain people's trust in his life. And I sort of think, that sort of underdog you can make into a really compelling, likable hero. Well, all they wanted, both here and in the UK, was another women character after No Way Back. So they made me change the gender. And I think you can sometimes know that even changing the gender, it's just not plugging a male name in. It doesn't work that way because women think differently, they fight differently, they solve problems differently. In this case, there's children involved, and a mother. It's just very difficult to sort of write a thriller where someone's tied down with a kid. Um, so there were a lot of different hurdles to get over that way. But I definitely do, to answer your question, want to write this multi-generational story that relates to the garment business. I'm a product of it. It's a fascinating business. It's a very crime-ridden business. My grandfather, who sort of is one of the legendary figures in the women's clothing business, used to ride around in his trucks with shotguns in case they were hijacked by the mob, and did discharge his weapon, and to the day he died, would show you this big scar that he had on his chest where he was stabbed by Louis Lepke at Murderers Inc. in New York. It wouldn't be without crime and thrills, but I'd like to make it more of a family-oriented saga. Marjorie Takala, nice name. Do your friends ever see themselves in your books? Good question. I mean, where is the low-hanging fruit that you can draw from? I don't think they see themselves, but I think that I've used friends. I try not to use my wife or my kids, just because, I don't know, I just think there are boundaries and I really don't want to use them. But I've put people I know. My wife, who's usually the first reader of my books, is always sort of giggling that when she sees elements of our life that find their way into the book. So I don't think no one's ever come up to me and said, that reminded me of me. But I think maybe that's some of the deftness of how you do your job as an author that they haven't, because I've definitely unsparingly borrowed from them and from situations. Melly, what is your new book about? Can you give us any juicy tidbits? Well, my new book, I mentioned earlier, has a similar setup in the sense that we have a young mom in her early 30s who has a handicapped kid with Asperger's syndrome, who has devoted herself after her divorce to taking care of her kids. She's successful. She's an executive. She works hard. She's got a deadbeat husband was a builder, and his company's gone belly up, and he can't pay her anymore. And she's paying for his kids' school and their home, and draining her savings. And all of a sudden, she gets called in and is fired. And now she just sees that she's hit the edge of a cliff, and she can't pay the school, and she's really panicked, and she's driving actually to sort of appeal to her ex-husband, and in rural New York, Westchester, Greenwich, and the road's a little turny, and she's behind this guy, and the guy suddenly drives off this embankment, car rolls, he's dead. She goes down to help him, and what does she find in there but a satchel full of cash, about $500,000 in cash. And she tries to decide what to do. She ends up, well, I won't say what she does. But let's face it, she obviously ends up with it, and clearly it wasn't free. That comes at a cost, and the people start to come look for it, and the trail that leads to her, some bodies start to fall. But it's interesting also because, as I mentioned, it involves these children who are sort of like early psychopaths or potential psychopaths that are called callous and unemotional, that do things even like will watch another kid drown just for the sort of feeling of what it's like to see someone die. And I've brought that element into it. And I've also brought, as I said, a lot of Hurricane Sandy. This takes place after Hurricane Sandy in neighborhoods that have been really affected by it. And so I've sort of brought these three themes in, and here I am finishing it up, and I don't think it's going to disappoint anybody. I think it's a pretty fair book. And it'll be called Everything to Lose. Hi, Laura. If you write a family saga based on the fashion biz, maybe kind of Archer's, I guess Archer's Harry Clifton story, where would you set it? New York or internationally, like Milan or Paris? Well, I would set it in New York for the most part, because that's where the stories that I would draw from um, originate from. Um, but my daughter is in the fashion business and she lives in Milan, so I guess I could borrow some stuff there. And her significant other is a Milanese, and so I will say, it would really be a New Yorker story because the kind of family that I am and the kind of setting that I want to bring into it is a uniquely New York sort of thing. It could also be LA. The whole junior business and jean business is set out of LA these days, but we'll see. Okay. John B., have you ever hated to kill off a character? Yes, I have, and I'm doing it now. I mentioned a little bend in this ending that occurred to me the other day, and I thought I had a pretty clear path to the finish line. And I think I'm killing someone off who I think readers are gonna not be happy to see. And I'm not sure what the right thing is, but I somehow think this is the right element for this book. And yeah, I mean, people grow emotionally tied to their characters, and when you kill them off, I mean, characters to an author are props. I mean, they're both people and they're props, and we need them to accomplish what we want to get done in the book. So sometimes one of the things about my books that I think readers who read me like is I'll do anything. I don't really believe in the rules of what to do and what not to do as long as you handle it deftly. And for my first book with Jim Patterson, where we actually kill someone, and in my second book with him, we killed off one of the main characters of the Women's Murder Club. Forget her name, but she was the attorney. And I mean, she was one of the key people in this group. And I've always sort of done it in a way where I think people were shocked that I would go this far to do it. And so I mean, in No Way Back, there's a character that I know everybody finds appealing who was killed in the middle of the book, and a lot of people have written in that it was sort of tough for them. So I like doing it. I like doing the unexpected. I like readers feeling that anything can happen in my books, and that it's not just gonna. I'm not an edgy person. My books aren't edgy, but I don't want I want the unexpected to take place in the books, and part of that is saying sayonara to a character sometimes, and also putting people in the sack together. Andrew Massey, hi there, Andy. Andrew, if any one of your books was offered to be turned into a movie, which one would you choose? Would you like to play one of the characters? Um, let's see. I'm trying to think of which of my books has the most sex in it. The Dark Tide. Um, no, I wouldn't want to play one of the characters, but I think my first, The Blue Zone, and this last one I thought was the most movie centric. Hopefully, it'll end up on TV. No Way Back. I think it's got big themes. I think it's got public themes. Um, I think it's got two very, very strong women characters that are in danger a lot. I think it's got an awfully fast pace. I think the bad guys are nasty. And like I said, it keeps getting larger in what's at stake. So I think it would make a great film, and hopefully it'll make a great TV series. I'm just looking at someone who said, I didn't know the garment business was crime ridden. Absolutely. There was always a struggle between the union and between individual, proprietors. And the union, actually, it was Jewish gangsters more than anything were trying to take over the union. It's still actually organized crime is a factor in the ILGWU, but in the 30s and 40s, it was a very crime-controlled business, and not unlike what you would see in the Godfather movies. Prairie Dawn again. Do you read other books while you're writing? I don't read as much while I'm writing as when I don't. I have a hard time relaxing through reading, especially reading, thrillers. I just, you get a threshold, you can be bored with them. I sort of like to watch dippy television or ball games, or sports. to relax, because it's just, your head aches at the end of the day. And so sometimes reading thrillers isn't the best thing. Now, I love reading thrillers because to me it's sort of reading the competition as well. Whether it's on vacations or when I travel or when I'm in between books, and I can go through them as fast as anyone. But when I'm reading, I mean, I just read a book called The Sun, which I think was a beautiful literary book. Actually, three generations in Texas, starting in the Indian Wars and leading into one of them they become like an oil dynasty. Fascinating book. I'd recommend it. And I'm reading now Dennis Lehane's Live by Night, which I guess it won the Edgar Award last year. I don't think it was a very um, public book and a very promoted book, but I'm really liking it because it takes place in the time that I'm talking about starting this garment center book, and takes place in the late 1920s in Boston, and involves prohibition and stuff. So it's about, I really like it because it's historically set, but I can't plow through thrillers on a nightly basis. No. Are there any TV shows that have really caught your eye lately? Ray Donovan has caught my eye, and it's so dark that I don't really go in for that darkness that often. But I have to say that it's really well written. So it's on Showtime on Sunday nights. So that's become our new. Sorry for the phone ringing. Our new family gather around. Who's ever in the house? My kids are long gone, but I have a son who's back in for a while, and my daughter happens to be here, so I like Ray Donovan. Um, Trying to think what else sort of is out there. I love The Big C. I don't know if that's back on yet. I think it's starting again. I love Showtime. I just drew a blank. What's the Homeland One? I mean, loved it. I loved Kevin Spacey's political thing on Netflix, which just I forget the name, but and so try to find what's out there something. But I can watch my share of crap too, and I have to admit that I'm up to date on um, the um, the talent show, America's Got Talent. I sort of one of my kids got me involved in that in the middle of this season, and I'm now sort of hooked to it. Hmm. Let's see if there's something else out there. I can come up with one. Do you go to locations to do? Okay, here was one. How was Thriller Fest this year, and can you talk a little about that experience? Well, I mean, I've been involved in Thriller Fest for about 7 or 8 years. It's always fun. It's local for me, so it's easy. It's a conference. I like it because you get to see people you don't often see. You get to see fans. What I like most about it is Craft Fest, which is the 2 or 3 days before leading up to Thriller Fest, which is really about aspiring writers. And I've always taught a class at Craft Fest. This year I did one on creating pace in books. And I love sort of, you know, being collegial and taking some aspiring people under my wing. I like imparting whatever it is I may know, and I don't know how much I know, but I like imparting what it is, and I like to do it in an entertaining way. So I do like Thriller Fest. Panels are fun, but after 10 years and in a lot of things, you've done a million panels. You try to be glib, you try to be entertaining, you try to make people laugh. But they're there. This year we did something where we invited a handful of guests, where Ms. Galtami was one of the ones invited in who asked a question earlier. And it was fun, like 20 authors in a room, some big name authors, and we're all in there. And we have 5 fans, and everyone got to mingle and meet other authors. So that was a lovely aspect of it. So, the direct connection to fans is the best part of that to me. Pardon me. Desmond, I enjoyed The Jester. Interesting book, one I wrote with Patterson. If you haven't already answered this, do you find working in collaboration has any pitfalls or advantages that you don't encounter working solo? Well, The Jester is one of my favorite books. And trust me, I don't get a penny out of it if you go buy it. But it's something I did with Jim. It takes place in the 12th century, starts in the First Crusade and comes back to France. It's just a book that's really close to my heart. I loved it and loved the characters in it. And so I think, it was a lot of fun to read. And in that case, a lot of fun to research. I must have read 20 books on the Middle Ages on that one and visited a lot of castles in Europe. So to me, it was great. And as I said earlier, I really enjoyed my time working with Patterson. He's a brilliant guy. It's nice to be around brilliant guys and soak up what you can. I always sort of say it was a combination MFA/MBA in thriller management. And I like working with Jim. He's a nice guy, but he's kind of an angular guy. I'm kind of an angular guy. I guess two negatives make a positive. I think we got along pretty well, and I think we did good books. So it's nice having a guy who's, I think I was the first co-writer that he worked with on an ongoing basis. And it's just nice being around someone that it's also nice seeing your name at number one. So, there were a lot of aspects to it I liked. I learned an awful lot from him. So, in terms of pitfalls, I don't know. The only pitfall that comes to mind is at that time, I really wasn't doing any touring with him. I'm not sure if anyone is at this point, although I do see now writers and co-writers going around together, which is nice. I didn't, and I missed it. But as I say, we all aspire to be co-writers. We just want to be management, not labor. I think we're done. Well, I can't hear you, but I see a hook coming out, and I think we're finished. But I can't hear what you're saying. I don't have volume on, I think, so I can't hear. The winner of the Kindle Fire is Sharon Chance. That's what they want me to say. You set me up for that. I'm smart enough to read a cue card. Well, congratulations, Sharon. And I guess it does come with a couple of my books. So if you haven't read me, I hope you'll pick it up and enjoy them. I do think I'm the kind of author where people say who haven't read me, God, I can't believe I haven't read you so far. You're now my favorite. Have I missed you? So enjoy it. And I don't know if this is getting to Sharon, but you're supposed to email BookTrib to get it. And thank you, Mr. Gross, and congrats, Sharon. So I've enjoyed being with everyone. I hope it was fun. Thanks for tuning in. And email me or find me on Facebook. I'll see you online. Bye.